was Nissan's attempt at a sports compact in the early to mid.
Look at my face. So I went ahead and took a little bit of a drive to review my SER Spec V. Basically just drove it around, talked about the car like some kind of wannabe Jeremy Clarkson. There is a lot of road noise because I just used my GoPro, but it's fine. It's fine. I have no sun visors.
Basically all they did was they took a regular Nissan Sentra, put big rims, 2.5 liter engine, 6-speed manual transmission, stiffened the suspension, stiffened the steering, and slapped the SER Spec V logo on it. Back when this car was new, it kind of lived in cars like the Honda Civic Shadow. People typically kind of ignored this car, sort of like the middle child. And so I bought this car as a daily driver, and it's mostly stock. And you know, this car was made in the days of, you know, the late 90s and early 2000s was the best era for reliability because they had computers, and this car does have a electronic throttle. However, that's about it. Kind of like the Terminator was more machine than man. New cars are more computer than car. And this car was made in an era before that transition happened. It's more car than computer. And that being said, there's less computer systems to break. There's not 10 million computers, one for the engine, another one for the infotainment, another one for the air conditioning, whatever. It has the engine, computer, and that's it. The rest of it is mechanical. It has mechanical switches. It has mechanical everything apart from, say, having a distributor with points or something like that. You know, it does have electronic ignition. Now, I'm not trying to say that this car doesn't have problems, because it definitely does. A few serious ones, actually. If you've researched these cars at all, you'll probably already know about these because they're pretty well known. But I'm going to go over them anyway just because they're pretty serious. And if you're looking into buying one of these cars, you're going to want to know about them. So the first one being that the precats on these cars, they have a tendency to explode a little bit. Just a little bit. Which in turn makes them be sucked into the intake, which is ungood. So usually when you find one of these cars, pretty much, I've never actually seen one that had the precat still on it. Most of them have had headers put on with no precat, and it's fine. It still passes inspection just fine. It still has the one below it because it had 2 cats to begin with. Another reason why you don't really see them with precats still on them is because the ones that didn't have the precats removed are not running anymore for obvious reasons. Second thing is this engine has variable intake runners, meaning that it has 4 valves, 1 in each runner, to change the runner length at a certain RPM, about 5,000. And the screws that hold those plates on have a tendency to, again, going with the theme, fall out and be sucked into the intake. Again, ungood. And Nissan actually recalled some of the engines and put new screws in that I think they had lock washers on them that were supposed to not fall out. But people reported that even the recalled engines with the new improved screws fell out as well. So the common fix with that is to just take the intake manifold apart, put Loctite on the screws, and put it back together and pray that none of them have already been sucked into your intake and screwed up your valve seats or your cylinder walls or whatever else inside your combustion chamber. Ungood. Third problem being the alternator is right next to the exhaust, so it has a tendency to get hot and prematurely fail. Some company out there makes a plate that you can install. However, I just put heat wrap on mine, and I haven't had the alternator fail yet. We'll see. But the heat wrap definitely does keep away some of the heat. Another small gripe that most people have with these cars is the fact that the torque mount on the engine is extremely soft, and it lets the engine rock back and forth a ton. So common mod is to replace it with a polyurethane one. These engines are dual overhead cam, they idle pretty smoothly, so having a polyurethane mount isn't really an issue. This car is definitely a product of its time. You know, it was the early 2000s. People listening to Limp Bizkit and driving SER Spec. Well, actually, no, they weren't driving SER Spec Vs. They were driving Civics. Because nobody bought the Spec V. And this car has huge rims that so huge that they don't look stock. It looks like somebody put bigger rims on the car. It has a subwoofer in the back from the factory, which mine is blown up. And of course, the front bumper. The front bumper was meant to resemble the GTR V-Spec. But in 2004, the GTR-inspired front bumper was removed for reasons. I don't know. Maybe they changed their mind and didn't like it. They were tired of producing a special bumper for the Sentra when they already had a bumper for the Sentra. The SER Spec V also has other styling cues that let you know what it is. It has different skirts and a rear spoiler that doesn't do anything. What do you expect? Actually, no, it does do something. It holds the middle brake light. So, it's not completely worthless. Now, when you think of a 4-cylinder compact car, you think good gas mileage, which this car doesn't have. That being said, the way that Nissan got 175 horsepower out of a naturally aspirated inline-4 was displacement and compression. This engine is 2.5 liters. That's a big 4-cylinder. The only 4-cylinders that I know of that are bigger than 2.5 liters are diesels. It's thirsty. It's definitely thirsty. However, what you do get is peak torque at around 4,000 RPM. And in a small, light car, it feels like it's faster than it is. I'm not sure exactly what the 0 to 60 is. We'll find out in a second. But it's a torquey little engine, and so it's basically impossible to kill these engines from a start out. So if you have a kid that's learning to drive stick, or if you're a kid and you want to learn to drive stick, these are perfect cars to get. They're so easy to drive. The 6-speed manual transmission, you have to shift it a lot, but as far as manual transmission cars go, you can't get much more easy to drive than this. Along with the 6-speed manual transmission, you also got a limited slip differential. I'm not sure exactly what the ratio is, but torque steer for days. Not enough to like send you off of the road, but it can catch you by surprise. The car doesn't go straight at full throttle. One of my biggest gripes with these cars is the electric throttle. Now, most new cars do have electric throttles and they work very well. But this was the early 2000s, so this car has an electric throttle that doesn't work very well. When you're driving along, you let your foot off the gas, you say, okay, close the throttle plate. And the computer says, no, I think I'll leave it open just for a little bit longer. And it's annoying. Okay, 0 to 60 in the SER Spec V.
So on the interior, given that it was the early 2000s, there's no sort of technology. Everything is physical, everything has a button, and everything works. The only thing's wrong with my car's interior in particular is the center dash piece is broken, and the glove box is held in by 2 plastic tabs that you push in and turn that are supposed to hold it in, but they don't really work too well. So sometimes when you go to open the glove box, it just goes. So if you're still watching at this point, you're either a huge car nerd or you already own a Spec V and you wanted to know what another person thought about your car. But anyway, so the Spec V at the end of the day is an early 2000s economy car with a little bit more power, a 6-speed transmission, limited slip differential, and some Fast and Furious style rice.